I think the only real clock we have is not the human clocks that we put on the walls, but it's the ones in the sky. It's the real only true clock that we have, in that it's been keeping time for the whole time we've been here, and will continue to maintain that time as well. So I see it as, from a scientific point, we're just pattern keepers, time watchers, time interpreters, pattern interpreters. Now, right. So now from a spiritual perspective, and this is where I think intuition becomes very important in astrology readings. And this, again, varies on the astrologer. I myself am, as many you can tell, more on the scientific side, but you might get an astrologer who's more on the spiritual side, maybe looking at those Akashic records, or maybe looking at your past life literally, or maybe drawing some tarot cards or something like this. So that's a very important part of astrology too.
Welcome to the show, Athen.
Hey, Bola, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for being here. So I read a bit about your bio before we start. Athen Chimenti is a true sidereal astrologer. He's dedicated to spreading the word about true sidereal astrology and how powerful it is in bringing clarity and direction to people's lives. And Athen has helped more than 5,000 people from around the world gain clarity through his astrology readings, as well as teaching through his video courses. That is so wonderful, because I think astrology is a very powerful modality. It's a tool, and it can bring us a lot of clarity, especially around what we are doing in this physical earth plane. But I also think it would be really good to hear about sidereal astrology, which I know is slightly different, or very different from what is popularly known. Just I'd love to hear a bit about that from Athen today. But first of all, Athen, I'd like to know what led you to this place where you are really passionate about astrology, about true sidereal astrology in particular, and how has that journey been to take you to this place of passion?
Yeah, well, honestly, 15 years ago, I would have never seen myself doing this, because I was always very left brain, very scientific, like kind of objective, like you'd have to, really I'd want to verify everything. You'd have to, if you were to come to me with astrology at that time, I probably would have wanted a debate about how it's BS or whatever, right? So it's very much like with the senses and only the things that we can, feel, touch, taste, etc. But I was always into personal development, and I think that's the thing that really saved me, or really helped me develop, just grow as a person. And so I started to get into meditation, and that's really when things started to change for me. So that was about 14 years ago now, 15 almost. I left society in many ways. I was living outside of Las Vegas in Death Valley, and just had my own retreat there in the middle of the desert with my dogs, and really just having the most silence and peace that I could ask for. And that's when I started to get into Eckhart Tolle, meditation teacher, and really started to become much more present in my everyday life. And that's when things really expanded for me. So that's where I had what you could call a spiritual awakening. So that was actually in late 2011, December of 2011. And that's when my mind really started to become aware there's so much more than just the senses, right? In terms of what you can, touch, taste, etc. So with that awareness, the first thing that I gravitated towards was astrology. And I think it's because astrology is a very left brain modality when it comes to the spiritual arts, right? It's it takes a lot of math. You're looking at the physical positions of the planets, very calculating. So anyways, as a personality, I think that's why I was drawn to it, but I loved it. And I got really deep into it. That was during the heydays of YouTube, which you could just publish a video and get 10,000 views overnight for practically any topic.
Are you looking for AAA grade jewelry or gemstones? Utter Spirit are those we will recommend. They actually do really wonderful jewelry. They have gifted me really nice lapis lazuli, which is really good for connecting with universal wisdom. And also this shungite beads, which come from Russia, and they're really aren't rare, because a lot of the times you get shungite beads which affect your skin, and these beads have been really nice. My son also loves them, and outer spirit, they give back to nature as well. So that is really nice that they are contributing to the environment. And they also send this intention cards. They're quite nice. This shungite card says, I cleanse myself from harmful energies. And the lapis lazuli card says, I am connected to the infinite wisdom of the universe. So there's information that goes with it, as well as them, producing really good quality jewelry. So I will recommend to connect with outer spirit. And the code will be going with this video. So check them out.
So I was very fortunate that I started to implement what I was learning as I was teaching it, and built my, started to build what was a previous channel, but what eventually entered into Mastering the Zodiac, which is the current channel that we're using today. But I was using tropical astrology, mainstream astrology, like everybody else. But like you said, I still found it I still do to this day, all forms of astrology, very helpful for personal development, very helpful for understanding the self, and a great tool for helping others navigate their own lives and helping them, really access their self and their independence. So that's what I've been doing since then. There's been a lot of, changes, like with True Sidereal and stuff, but I would say that, really the turning point was there with spiritual awakening, if you will, that led me to what you could say is a more balanced approach to life, where it wasn't all left brain, much more right brain now, but a more healthy balance between the two with astrology.
That's wonderful. I love it when you said you went on a retreat with your dogs, and you chose to really dedicate and invest time, because I know that this journey of spiritual awakening and really understanding that calling, it was a spiritual calling into a modality, into being a healer, into being a way shower, requires that investment, that dedication, that audacity to actually, invest even more time into it. Thank you for sharing that, Athen. So would you share with us what is the difference between the work that you do and that modern day astrology as we all know it?
Yeah. So mainstream astrology, as we know it in the West, most people aren't aware that it doesn't use the actual sky. So we would think that, if you're a sun in Leo or a sun in Gemini, that's where the sun was when you were born. We just sort of make that, assumption. And it's a totally valid assumption to have, because that's what we would expect. But the truth is that the Western tropical, what they call the tropical system that's used in the West, it uses the seasons. And that's why with all of the sun signs, for example, they always start exactly on the spring equinox. So the spring equinox starts Aries, okay? And then all the signs after that are 30 degrees, and which roughly is 30 days apart from there, right? And this was, tropical was a system that was started 2,000 years ago. And 2,000 years ago, the sky did match with the seasons, okay? So it was when it was the spring equinox, the sun was actually entering into Aries. And so this goes to Ptolemy, for those that know. So it's like scientists at the time that sort of standardized this practice of tropical. The thing is, though, is that we've continued to use it in the West through the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, and now today. And I still think it's very accurate because it's still using the seasons. But again, what my whole practice is about is just helping share the word that it doesn't actually represent the actual locations. So if you're a sun in Gemini, for example, it's very likely that you're actually a sun in Taurus. If you're a sun in Leo, for example, it's very likely you're a sun in Cancer. And this goes on and on for all the planets, not just the sun, right, in the chart. So we all sort of know this as astrologers, like the astrologers know this, and this is all common knowledge in the astrological actual community, or anyone who's, gone more than just the sun signs, a little bit deeper into the chart. But it doesn't, it didn't really hit me until it became experiential. So I was doing tropical like everybody else in the West. That starts there at least. And, I was going to go check out this, and I knew about Sidereal again in the headspace. I knew about it. And because we'll talk about it, but it's like, that's what they use in the East is the Sidereal version. So I knew about it. It's all very practical, but again, not really giving it much thought or much, awareness is, there was supposed to be a full moon in what I think was Gemini. Yeah. In Gemini. And I got my smartphone because at the time, this is when these apps just came out where you could hold up the phone and see exactly where the planets are by holding up your phone. So I was like, let me go check out this full moon. So I go and I'm expecting to see this full moon in Gemini, right? All ready and prepared. And there it was in the middle of Taurus. And from that moment on, it just really hit me that I get why tropical is accurate. It's you're taking the wheel of life and you're putting it over the seasons. And if seasons are obviously a consistent thing, so it works. It's the same wheel of life that we use. But astrology, it really hit me that why aren't we using the actual sky? So from that point forward, I went into what we might call regular sidereal, or mainstream sidereal. And this is, again, a very good example is in the East. So with Vedic astrology, they use sidereal astrology, the mainstream fixed 30 degrees. The reason it's what I call mainstream is that it uses the 30 degrees for all the signs. So just like tropical, it doesn't start Aries on the spring equinox, which would be the tropical system. It does start Aries more sky correct, which is where Aries is closer to where Aries actually starts. But the mainstream sidereal, the vast majority of sidereals, use an even 30 degrees for all the signs. And if you look at the constellations, you'll see that the constellations are all different sizes. So you have Leo, that's very large. Virgo is very large. Then you have like Cancer is very small. Libra is very small. So this is how our ancestors who first determined these zodiac signs intended. There was a reason why they chose these sizes. And it's not because Leo looks like a lion. I mean, Leo could look like anything, honestly. It's just stars and, you can connect them any way you want, like a cloud, for example. There's a very specific reason why they were given these dimensions of the wheel of life, as I call it, or the astrological wheel. So that's what we try to get close to. So we call it true sidereal. I wish I could just call it astrology, to be honest, because to me, that's what astrology is, the sky, astro. And I wish I could also just call it sidereal. But unfortunately, because of, what we're using today, we use the term true sidereal astrology, which is true, meaning here that it's the system that is using the true constellation boundaries. It's a technical term for we're using the actual true sizes. So true sidereal astrology, this is factoring in the actual size of the constellations. It's basically astronomical astrology, but as you can see, that's kind of like astrology should be astronomical, so we don't call it astronomical. True sidereal, it's using the actual placements of the planets. And it's actually quite different from most other astronomical astrologies too, because with astronomy, they're not really concerned with planetary placements. With astronomy, they're not looking at where the sun, you can with the system, but they're not trying to get very precise like astrologers are when it comes to where's your Venus, where's your Mars in relation to the constellations. So we created our own system here called the midpoint system, which takes the midpoints between the last star of a constellation and the first star of the next, which is basically the visual halfway points between each constellation. And we use that as the boundary. Extremely accurate, obviously. Been doing this for a long time, very accurate readings. Not the only system. I still find tropical to be, like I said, very accurate. And Vedic, extremely accurate too. And just a shout out to all those that are using Vedic. They are using the actual stars when you go deeper into Vedic. So if you go deeper into Vedic, you're using what are called the nakshatras and the padas, and these are using the actual stars. So even though they are using the even 30 degrees for the signs, they will incorporate the actual stars, which is a true sidereal interpretation. But anyways, that's what we're doing in the West. True sidereal, it's like you're going outside and looking at the sky and seeing exactly what constellations your planets are in. So very proud of it. It's been a long journey. We've grown the community a lot. And we have a bunch of resources, one being an online chart calculator, which will, I'll give you a link to or mention later, where everyone can just check out their actual sky and see what the sky actually looks like and see if it resonates too, because we have a little report there and a different interpretation. But anyways, that's what's led me to True Sky was, I think, just visually seeing it And of course, then practicing it and just noticing a lot of the positive results that we've seen over the years with it.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Ethan. I love the way you describe the differences. And I'm someone who believes that when it comes to modalities, it's really about using a combination as opposed to one or the other. So I'd love to know, Ethan, if say for instance, if someone was born on the 22nd of, say, January, in a particular location, what would the modern astrology give to them as clarity, as something that is a theme, as something that is useful to them? And what would your true sidereal astrology provide? What's the difference? I know you've already mentioned something around it's probably going to be a different sign, as we know it, and a little bit more about how the modern astrology is. I believe it's looking more at the seasons or themes or just something that the everyday man can really come to understand how the modern astrology actually compares to that true sidereal astrology, which I understand from what you're saying is really looking at the accurate positions of the actual constellations as opposed to what. So just give us a bit of a breakdown of the two. And somebody born on the 22nd of January or the 22nd of March, what would the two astrology types tell them about themselves?
Yeah, completely. Okay. So, first things first with the difference, right? So, like I said, I still find tropical accurate. And I think the best way to describe it is that, and I agree with you totally, the more perspectives we can get on the self, the better, right? So what I think the tropical perspective is showing us is the seasonal perspective. Okay, well, what does that mean? So they've taken the wheel of life, the zodiac wheel, because the zodiac wheel is nothing unique. It's just the wheel of life. It goes from birth to death, or from the growing process or the life process. It's all represented in that sort of circular pattern. So they've taken that wheel of life and they've overlaid it on top of the seasons. So what that means then is that although it's not visually where everything is in the sky, it's still seasonally where everything is. So it's going to naturally represent the more seasonal self. So if we think about that, we have the sun, in the current model, we have the earth rotating around the sun. So it's very much this, it doesn't change. It's very static. So it represents the sort of, and I don't mean this in like a negative way or anything, but it's like the wheel of karma. And karma not being bad, it's just that we are in a physical world. We're having a physical experience. And the seasons is a very physical representation of that. A way to see it astrologically is that, like I said, the tropical system is veering away from the true sidereal system because 2,000 years ago, they were matching. Now, 2,000 years later, they're like a sign, sometimes up to two signs different with true sidereal. And that's growing. And eventually it'll be like 180-degree difference, like completely different. But this is, a very slow process, first of all. But when it comes to the two different systems, tropical stays static. It sticks to that seasonal system. So here it represents what I would call the more physical, third dimensional. Again, I'm not trying to downgrade it. It's extremely valuable. Knowing about your third dimensional physical experiences, your third dimensional physical self, your third dimensional physical life energy. It does a very good job of showing your ascendant sign for those that know, like your sun, moon, and ascendant. The ascendant is like your physical appearance, which true sidereal doesn't tend to show. That's one way that tropical is more accurate than true sidereal, in that the tropical ascendant tends to show more of your physical appearance with your ascendant, and you don't get that from the ascendant with true sidereal. So the tropical is the more physical self, very good for like predicting maybe what might happen, probabilities with your physical life, physical everyday practical life things, and again the more physical self. So then, what is sidereal or even true sidereal showing? So if we're using the actual sky and the actual stars, I view this as the fundamental self. Of course, the self has like all these different variations, but the closer to the essential self, okay? Because if we're using astrology, then to me, it's obvious that the most fundamental chart would be the one closest to the actual sky. So Sidereal, at least attempting to do that, is getting closer to that fundamental self. So some see it as the more spiritual self, the deeper self, the part that's having these experiences consciously, maybe not physically, maybe not karmically as much, but spiritually, spiritual growth, personal development, consciousness development, all this more, spiritual or under the surface, fundamental kind of stuff of our experience here, or which you could say not bound to the physical world or not limited to the physical experiences too. So here it really comes down to, what system is crossing your path at a certain time. I believe that whatever's crossing our path at a certain time is meant for us to at least consider. Doesn't mean everything that crosses our path is good for us. There's a lot of things we cross our path, and it's a lesson to maybe not go down that path. But the point here is that like for me, tropical worked very well for a long time. It works still well for me when I want the physical experience. It was tremendously useful for my growth and development, as I said earlier. But what I notice is that for those that, are open to it, or just maybe ready for a different type of evolution, true sidereal tends to cross their path. And maybe for some of you listening, that's the case right now. You're hearing about it. Maybe you're going to look, at your chart, whatever. So it's all about what's coming across your path at a certain time. And maybe it's crossing your path because it's useful for you at the current evolution, that, current development that you're on. Not that one's higher or lower than the other, just for whatever that is at the time. So what I find with True Sidereal, the community here, huge into personal development. I mean, I don't even do readings for like predicting the future. Everyone who comes to me, like the vast majority, is about personal development. What's my life path? How can I align to my life path? How can I do what's more spiritually meaningful? Who am I really? What's my true self? These are all the things that I believe True Sidereal really clarifies and really illuminates for individuals. So that's our unique thing. That's what we provide there is for that path or for that particular individual on that type of the journey. Because it's never good to get too, narrow-minded with any system, as we then limit ourselves to the true self, because the true self actually is the whole zodiac wheel. It is the whole wheel of life. And what I really try to arrive at with astrology readings is that we don't want to be operating, on any one point of the chart. We want to be operating in the center of the chart, where we're balanced all of the different elements of life as close as we can, as consciousness as itself, where it's not tipping the scales. Because as soon as we go into with this karmic life, as soon as we go into one extreme, there's consequences, right? It doesn't matter, positive, negative, whatever. It's one extreme, there's always the counterbalance. So I do believe in the more balanced, centered path. And again, you don't need astrology for this, and that's the whole main point. You don't even need astrology, but it's a great tool that's available if you want to use it. And with True Sidereal, I think it's a great way of illuminating what's going on under the surface, things like your life path, things like what might be closer to your true self or what you're here to do, your spiritual identity, things of this nature.
Thank you for explaining that, Athen, because, you are right. There are so many themes that we've all come to explore. Each and every one of us has come to explore something unique, and whatever we feel aligned to. This is what my book is about, Daily Soul Bytes. I wrote Daily Soul Bytes in 2020, and it's really talking about the different perspectives of self. So we tend to have a number of different perspectives, whether we're aligning to higher perspectives of love, of kindness, of gratitude, or lower perspectives of survival and fear, and they're all within us. And really becoming to have that self-awareness that allows us to know when we are aligning towards something. And it's not right or wrong. It's really about knowing what we want, knowing what we prefer, and aligning to what we prefer for our best outcome. So I love it when you said that, this is not about one or the other. It's really about knowing what you want to align to for your own personal growth. But I know that we are not static beings. We are constantly changing beings, and especially I believe in timelines. We're always jumping timelines, and the version of us that we were in 2010 is not the same version. So having certain predictions for me is really probably null and void to some extent, because we do have a great degree of empowered nature within us that allows us to change in any direction that we feel inclined to. So having a modality that allows us to really understand that unchanging self is so key in a world that is constantly changing. So I would love to hear more about your work as to how it supports those who come to work with you. How does your work support them to really understand that unchanging self from the soul? I am getting the sense it's definitely a soul blueprint type of reading. Or tell us more about it.
Yeah, and I totally agree with everything you said there too, Bola. It's very well said. Right. So what we focus on, so we have another astrologer, Anna Maria, and she does the soul evolution. So she focuses more on the evolution of the soul and that path of growth. Mine, for example, and this is all just preference. Mine, for example, is on the life path. So when someone comes to me with maybe they want clarity on career, relationships, or something like this, or just in general, it's like, okay, well, let's see how things are aligned to your path. So what we figured out with this chart is that if we're living in alignment with our path, our life is very fulfilling. I've done a lot of these readings, I don't want to be absolute, but like 99% of the readings, if someone's fulfilled in a particular area, it's seen as them aligning to the path in the chart. If they're unfulfilled, they're having challenges, they feel stuck, they have uncertainty, they're off of the path in terms of what the chart is showing as the path. And the chart's very specific about what the path is. For those that want to know technically, for me, I'm looking at the north and south nodes, Rahu and Ketu in Vedic astrology, and the planets associated with them, and really tying the chart around those two. And those are considered the life path points. So for me, I come from like so like Anna Maria will come from this, evolutionary path. I'll come from, let's work with how to align to your life path energy. Are you off of your path? Are there any particular areas where you're off of your path? If you're feeling stuck or stagnant or not having clarity, I can almost guarantee you're off of your path in that area. Let's figure out what your path is, first of all, and how to align to it in those particular contexts or those particular situations. So it's tremendously helpful. And, it's gotten to a point now where I take a lot of pride that if by the end of the reading, you get that confirmation and clarity, it's like you won't need another reading. You won't need more astrology after that, because, that's it. If you're clear on your path, and if what we've seen with astrology, if you're on your path and at least a fulfillment, you're living a fulfilling life. What's, what else is there? There's more, but really that's really what I take a lot of pride in, is focusing on that. So I love helping people with that, just illuminating what the path looks like, and then getting very practical with it. Like, okay, tell me about this person, romantic maybe, or maybe it's your business partner, whatever. Tell me about them. Okay, this sounds like a very karmic or past life associated relationship or dichotomy or situation. Tell me what you're feeling like doing with your career. Maybe we look at that and say, okay, well, that does sound very much in alignment with your future life path, and here's why. So what ends up happening is then the client gets confirmation. And again, all this is confirmation. So it's not like anything in the reading is like, oh, wow, I didn't know that about myself. Like if that happens in the reading, I know I've done something wrong, because we all deep down already know who we are and we know what our life path is. But there is a lot of noise in life, and there's a lot of internal noise too, which leads to uncertainty and stuff like this. And there's a lot of, we just don't know exactly. So the astrology helps us get a little more precise with that. So by the end of the reading, either feeling more confirmed in the areas that are going well. So the areas that are going well, more conviction. Okay, great, I know why. And then the areas that are not, there's the clarity in terms of how to recalibrate things to do that. I believe we're never fully off of our path. We're never fully off of our path. But what I mean is like if there's a certain area that's not going well, we're not consciously aligning to it in the balanced way. We're not on our balanced path. We're not on our healthy path in that particular situation. So the astrology can get very accurate, very, very practical, very specific about what that path is and how to align to it. And now I would say, I don't know, I don't know your chart, Bola. I haven't looked at anything, but like, for example, I don't know if this is your actual chart or whatever, but I wouldn't be surprised if like you had, say, your North Node in Sagittarius or your North Node in the ninth house, because these are about doing things like podcasts. These are about different perspectives. Everything you said there about having different perspectives and all this is very much the ninth house area. It's the right, it's developing the right brain while staying practical in the left brain. But anyways, like this is the kind of stuff where we get more confirmation. Like, okay, well, this is maybe why some parts of your life are going well, and then any areas that maybe there isn't clarity, here's some perspective to help recalibrate things, to help you have more fulfillment in those lives. So I view it as very practical, and that's why I like it. It's very hands-on. You get very specific. It's not coaching or anything like that, but it's very specific in that sense. And yeah, so I take a lot of pride and a lot of enjoyment in getting into that more detail and nitty gritty of the everyday life stuff there for people.
I love how you really help to bring a deeper sense of clarity. Because I think when we have that clarity as beings walking on this earth plane, it does help us to be more intentional. It does help us to not waste time doing things that do not necessarily serve us, or we have not come on this earth plane to do. So there is a lot of valid impact that I'm sure your work has, and I'd love to know a bit more about it. But I was curious about the soul path astrology that you mentioned, because it does sound like the life path is looking at this one lifetime. Or what is the difference between that life path work that you do and the soul evolution work? Does that cut across a number of different lifetimes, for instance?
Yeah, it can. Yeah. So that's like more of the work that Anna Maria does. So that's, you can look at, so, like we don't know if there's actually past life. We don't know if there's past life on the earth, like specifically, but we can look at it in a chart in terms of like where you're coming from and where you're going. That's how I like to look at it, is like, okay, how's it showing up for you now? That's what I mean by like, this is again more of like a left brain practical way of approaching astrology. It's like, let's figure out how to practically have fulfillment in your life right now, in this moment, whatever. But with astrology, like with what Anna Maria can do, is she can look at past lives, even multiple past lives. Basically, she looks at it as the evolution of the soul. Okay. And so that there's tremendous value in that, of course, that helps you in the now moment too. But it's coming from it with this is where the evolution is taking place. This is looking more at things from the past and in the potential future, as you said, as we're sort of manifesting that, but where things have grown and what are the potentials of growth in the future as well. And that's a reading that looks at a lot more of a wider breadth of the rest of the chart too, in terms of incorporating different elements, like even Pluto, for example, being very deeper and very karmic and stuff, which I do look at, but it's not like it's not, there's many readings that go and I don't even look at Pluto, for example, where for me, it's more kind of linear. You can use true sidereal as like Anna Maria does, in a much more broader and evolutionary soul development sort of path as well. So all that's available. Basically, everything you can do with mainstream astrology, you can do with true sidereal as well. We could even go into and do personality. In fact, the report thing, we have a 15-page report, which I'll share with your audience. It goes into all the placements of your chart. So your sun sign, your moon sign, the houses, the aspects, all the configurations. So this very good for self-understanding, very good for identity, very good for knowing, your life path, but not as much into that as much as this is who I am. This is what I'm here to learn. This is what I'm here to develop. So yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do, and anything you can do with tropical or mainstream, you can do with true sidereal, and vice versa, of course. So it does all center around either identity awareness or life and awareness. And then there's the predictive world, which I personally, and Anna Maria doesn't either as well. We're I think more on the same page as perhaps like you, Bola. Like we believe we're actively manifesting our future, and our perception and our beliefs are changing our reality. So we like to focus more in terms of like, okay, here's the potentialities, and even play around in the realm of probabilities. So for those that maybe want more probabilistic things, like when is this going to happen or whatever, we can play around in that world. But I always make it known that, we're playing with probabilities, just like the weather. It's like the weatherman doesn't know exactly when or what the weather's going to be, but we can play around with probabilities, and the higher the probability, more likely. So we can play around with that. But as you can see, generally, and I think it's probably just the nature of, like I said, the community and true sidereal, we are approaching things from that more personal development sort of level. But I think anything personal development, you could probably utilize astrology for.
Thank you for distinguishing between the two, that life path and the soul, because that soul evolution is also very important, because we have sequences. Not everybody believes in reincarnation, but there is a sequence of things that happen as a soul that I've come to understand, and we can come to understand what the patterns showing up mean. There are certain patterns that we find ourselves, sometimes we can flow with it if it's something that we prefer, and sometimes it's something that is restricting to us, in this particular lifetime. And understanding those patterns and giving ourselves permission to look at something else, because sometimes we need somebody to help us co-create that permission slip, or even giving ourselves that permission. And I believe going to practitioners like yourself really is a really powerful way of coming to that place of giving ourselves permission to go on a new journey. And I also work with Akashic Records. I'm an Akashic Record practitioner. So I work with my clients to really understand what the patterns are, the guides around them, and how to become much more intuitively connected to the gifts that they have within. We all have gifts within us. And sometimes those gifts are hidden. Sometimes they're more conscious or more evident from early on. But as much information as we can allow about ourselves, and as much permission as we can allow for our own self, is really key in living our best lives, I believe. So I would love to hear more, Athen, about the art and the science of your work, because I've heard that, and I'm sure you have as well, that astrology is a kind of a bridge between the arts and the science. Could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So so the science part is, I think a great way of saying it is to use your word there, patterns, right? So I think what we're seeing with astrology is the patterns of the wheel of life. So I'm speaking about the scientific side, right? So, what I think is going on scientifically, personally, is that I don't think the planets are like having some kind of effect on us, like gravity or anything like that. Like Newtonian effect is what I mean. So like cause and effect, like with particles, physical things. Definitely on a quantum level, though, in the sense that I think that we're all connected. I think the entire universe is connected, and the entire universe has cycles. And it's almost like a system. It is a system in itself, obviously, but it has a repeating pattern. And so what we're doing with astrology, I believe, is that we're not, I think the only thing we're doing with astrology is we're just seeing what time it is. What time is it in this universal cosmic cycle? And that's because, well, the planets are obviously part of the universe, part of that cycle. And so what I think our ancestors did is, I think when Jupiter was in front of Cancer, certain things happened. And so they're like, okay, well, what's happening right now? Well, it's expanding the emotional world. The family's being developed right now. And they noticed these patterns, and they said, okay, the archetype for that is Cancer, the crab. That is the shell of the crab. That's the protector. We're protecting for the soft insides. These are all symbolic energies for Cancer. I think that was very, there's all symbolism for what happens when things are passing in that part of their cycle. So that's all I think we're doing with astrology. We're just seeing what time it is. I think the only real clock we have is not the human clocks that we put on the walls, but it's the ones in the sky. It's the real only true clock that we have, in that it's been keeping time for the whole time we've been here, and will continue to maintain that time as well. So I see it as, from a scientific point, we're just pattern keepers, time watchers, time interpreters, pattern interpreters. Now, right. So now from like, a spiritual perspective, and this is where I think intuition becomes very important in astrology readings. And this, again, varies on the astrologer. I myself am, as many you can tell, more on the scientific side, but you might get an astrologer who's more on the spiritual side, maybe looking at those Akashic records, or maybe looking at your past life literally, or maybe drawing some tarot cards or something like this. So that's a very important part of astrology too. So that's the side that's where you have to use your intuition. You probably also, if you as a person have the ability to have maybe some sense of clairvoyance or higher perspective, or be able to connect to your higher self and things like this, where then you can look beyond the, in many ways, limit concrete, but limiting scientific, and use that scientific as a base, as a foundation to then broaden and start to look at things from a higher perspective. So you can get anywhere like a spectrum. You can go full left brain astrology. We're going to look exactly at everything. And like Hindu astrology Hindu is a very spiritual type of astrology, obviously, but it does tend towards more determinism, more physical exactness like that, which is interesting because there's kind of a mirroring effect there. Because then when you go to the West, actually, the more prominent astrologers are actually more on the abstract side, more on the spiritual side, where they'll just maybe look at your chart, and then from there, they're getting all these downloads and intuitions and talking about your chart from there. So anyways, it's a spectrum. On one extreme, you've got the full-on, scientific practical. On the other extreme, you've got the abstract spiritual. And everyone's going to be every astrologer and even every person is going to be somewhere on there. And that speaks to obviously being resonant with certain astrologers over others, right? Like some astrologers come to me, some go to Anna Maria, and even outside of True Sidereal. So a spectrum there. I think obviously the thing to strive towards is somewhere in the middle. As I've said before, I do believe in balance. So using the astrology science as the foundation, standing on that to then connect to something higher, the intuition, whatever it is. I think that's the best. I mean, I think that's the most accurate, most helpful, just the best. I don't know what other word to use, like the best form of astrology is if you can be somewhere there in the middle. But you work with what you have, we're all different. Like I'm not my intuition's good, but it's not nearly as good as, some others. And so it's also about knowing your strengths and what your preferences are. But if you can operate, at least for you, somewhere in the middle where you're balanced between the scientific and the creative, I think that's the ideal. I think that's great. I think that's where we get the best results, with astrology there.
Thank you, Ethan. Because I really like the word balance because, at the end of the day, it's really about us understanding that we are many different parts. And there are some parts of us on a particular day that might want one thing, and there might be another part of us that might want another. And really coming to that place of neutrality, in that place of presence, is always key in helping us to allow ourselves to stay grounded and allowing ourselves to stay on our path and not being too distracted, because some of these parts are calling our attention from a place of trauma. And it's important for us not to ignore it, but to acknowledge it as what it is as observers. So this is why I love the word balance, in that, yes, we may feel inclined to use some aspects or some modalities on particular days or other modalities on other particular days, but it's important to try to stay in that mindset of it's not about one or the other, it's about one and the other. And how does this benefit me today? And it doesn't define who I am. Staying open-minded, allowing ourselves to be curious about different modalities, about what they offer us, but knowing that it's not really who we are, that those parts are not really our true self. And I'd love to hear more about how somebody who comes to work with you. Do you will use the date of birth and the location, and you would work one-to-one or in groups, and I believe you also have courses. So tell us a bit more about how you present when clients come to you.
So we have a wide variety of these different services on the website, as a company, and different individuals too. But so what I do is a lot of the one-on-one sessions. So that is the life path stuff I was talking about there. I also do a lot of the courses too. So that's also one-on-one, like this call here, like a Zoom call, just like the sessions where we'll learn astrology together. And that's, I think, the best way to learn astrology, because that's really how our ancestors were doing it. In fact, even better would be like if we get to go outside in nature and digital's cool and it works in face to face, but if we were like outside and actually pointing to things like that's Cancer, you see that energy there, and like without putting it into words and describing it, you're just able to kind of point to it. Anyway, so I try to get as close to that as possible with the learning, with the courses, is like, again, getting to the fundamentals, but not learning in like, I don't know what the Western, just in the modern day sense where it's conceptualizing and putting everything into boxes. I try to describe like, hey, this is the wheel of life. This is much larger than what our human minds can comprehend, first of all. Yes, Cancer is a symbol, but we don't want to label it to the point where we limit the energy. That's why it can be called Cancer, but it's a crab. And so it's a picture which is closer to a more symbolic representation. So we want to feel the energy. We want to feel what it is symbolically. We all know what it is. We all know what Cancer is in all of our lives in terms of that energy. But we try to, as astrologers, try to be able to describe that a little bit better. We do need to use words. We need to be able to describe it, understand it, talk about it. So that's what we really focus on, is basically like astrology as a language. So I do one-on-one courses. I also have video courses where you can do self-study. And I, of course, have all these recordings of these lessons. What I take the most pride in, though, is our reports, because it's, like I said, 15 pages, and it's a great way to start because it's going to identify all the placements. Gives you that stronger sense of identity and clarity there. And then, once you get that, if even after that you're wanting more clarity, then in the one-on-one session, we could get more practical, like I said, more practical with it. Tell me more about your actual life situation. How can we apply the life path to that? It's kind of like a doctor with a book. It's like, the report is like your book. Like, we've designed it this way to be like your book, as close to that as we can, of your life energy in this life. So you read that, should get you where you need to be, just in terms of the confirmation. But if you do want that actual session where we get, more hands-on and more one-to-one, then obviously the sessions are there for that. Like I said, Anna Maria, so she does readings there. She's going to start doing workshops too. So for those that are into group activities, we're going to be offering those pretty soon. And just a lot of resources. And so this is what I recommend everyone do is, go to the website, masteringthezodiac.com. Right there on the top right is very, very noticeable banner. View your sign, view your true signs. Click that. It takes you to the calculator. So you type in your birth details. If you know, your time of birth and location, great. You don't actually need that, though. It's better if you have it. So if you know your birth time and your birth location, that's really good. But even without it, you can get the calculator results there. So anyways, it shows you the sky exactly as it was when you were born. It's got a true sky mechanism, which is really cool, which is like the app I was telling you, where you can actually see the sky when you were born, and you can kind of pan around and see exactly where all the planets are. That's a pretty cool addition there. But below that is a mini report. So that's going to tell you what it means, because obviously this is like, what's the sun in Cancer, right? So it's going to explain all this. So it's going to, the free report, your sun, moon, and ascendant, which is the three most important things astrologically, gives you that foundation with the self. And then, of course, if you want the full report, you can get that. So I'm happy to give a discount to your audience, 50% off on the report. So that's going to be at masteringthezodiac.com/report-discount. I'll give you the link for that, Bola, if you want to put it down below, but /report-discount. And that'll give you 50% off the report. So I always recommend everyone start there, look at the sky, see if the mini report resonates. If it does, get the full report. And then if you want to learn astrology, of course, we have all those resources, and even just free stuff too. Like, we've got a bunch of videos. I've been doing YouTube forever, got all this content, all these videos and articles and stuff. That's all on the website. So anyways, all that's at masteringthezodiac.com. You can also just Google Mastering the Zodiac. But yeah, that's what we've been focusing on lately. And software as well, which we're currently in the development of. We're using another software, but we're releasing another software. It's going to be all online, which we're really excited about. So that's where you can literally just with your smartphone or whatever, do these calculations on the fly, and save charts too, which is going to be really cool. That should be in about a month.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful, powerful clarity tool there, really powerful. Thank you. And what is the future of astrology as you see it? What's your vision? I know you've talked a bit about it and maybe going into nature or, that balance. What is your perspective of how you see astrology developing moving forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, one I don't get asked too much, so I have to think about this. So, I mean, this, I mean, I would love to see it tied into everything to some degree. Again, it's a tool. And, you don't need these tools, right? Like even the internet, like it's extremely valuable tool, but you don't need it. And it's about balance too. And there's a total argument to be made that, about cutting off from the online and living a more nature-based and balanced life. So you don't need this stuff. But, using it, I think it's important to use technology wisely and in a balanced way. And what I would love to see astrology used for is just, like I said, as more of a timing mechanism. So I'd love to see it like more incorporated into technologies and into the everyday kind of sphere of things, where it's giving you more confirmation on whatever it is you're doing. So it could be decision making. That's what we're going to be developing our app very much around. Like, obviously it's not meant to tell you what to do, but it's giving you confirmation on what's perhaps good to do at certain times. And utilizing this as a timing mechanism is what I would love to see. So being more, and this is in a way being more in alignment with nature. I'm talking like a 21st century person talking about incorporating it into apps and technology, because that's where we are. But, fundamentally, this is nothing new, because this is what our ancestors were already doing. I mean, every night there were the stars, and every night there was likely a campfire. Everyone was likely sitting around and telling stories based on the placements. And this is what we see with mythology and stuff. It's all very much centered around the sky, even religion, very much centered around the sky. So, if you're every night looking up at the sky and looking at this and talking about it with your community and sharing, I mean, I would love to see that more, obviously. Like, let's go back to those roots. That's fantastic. So from that side, I would love to see that more, going back to the roots and nature of just being more in alignment with nature. But again, we don't need that, right? Because I believe that you don't need to sit and look at the stars. You can go out in nature right now. You can get your feet in the dirt barefoot. You can connect more with your body. You can connect more. And all these connections to nature, the natural world, is going to tell you or give you what you need already. And a lot of it's, like I said, coming from you. And the astrology is just really there to confirm that. But as a tool, yeah, I would love to see it be used more nature-based, but also more technologically based too, where I would love to see if, like, we're maybe using a calendar that's more sky-based, or maybe even seeing probabilities coming up on your screen in terms of making certain kinds of, decisions or something, or what it might mean if someone crosses your path one day, maybe getting deeper wisdom or understanding about certain events that are happening in your life, but in a sort of real time or in a interface, or maybe even with the AI. Again, I'm an advocate of technology. I think AI can be used for good or bad, and I hope that it's used for a lot of good things. And I think one of the way it can do that is to help us like have something to interface with as a mirror, as a way to understand more about ourselves and help us connect more with ourselves and things like that. So yeah, so I don't know, good question. I would say one part of me, let's just take it back to nature. I want to see more, campfires and going outside and looking at the actual sky. But another part of me understands, obviously, with innovation and technology, let's incorporate that more with the everyday experiences, with an interface, maybe AI, something like that, where we get to use astrology more in our day-to-day lives.
I love that. No, I totally agree, because this is going to be about which timelines people will prefer to go on. There's some of us who will prefer to go more into nature, and some of us who will prefer to really use more of technology. And it's really about what we're choosing to align to. So it's probabilities, it's understanding self, being true to self, and accepting what is coming up synchronistically for each and every one of us. So thank you so much, Athen. Are there any final words that you have to say today that we may have missed before we go?
No, I thought it was a great discussion. It's great to share the different perspectives. And yeah, just if you want to get that different perspective, again, it's just one of many perspectives, but if you want a new one, masteringthezodiac.com, and check out the sky. See what the sky looked like when you were born. See what that might mean for you in terms of your life energy and your personality, and go from there and see where life takes you. But it was great being on, Bola. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for joining me, Athen. It was really nice to have you. And this is the first time we're talking about astrology on Daily Soul Bytes. So that was really nice. Thank you for that. wonderful conversation. And I do want to thank our audience for watching us today and joining us today. And for those who haven't subscribed, I do want to remind you to subscribe, to like, and to share, and to connect with me if you do want to work with me, and to connect with Athen regarding this powerful validation tool to deepen that clarity, deepen that understanding and acceptance of self, because this is truly when we begin to live our life paths, when we come to that deeper awareness of who we truly are. So thank you again, Athen. And I do want to invite our guests to connect with Daily Soul Bites, my book, which is now available anywhere books are sold, online, a bestseller in its own sweet spot. And I look forward to seeing you on the very next episode of Daily Soul Bites show. Bye-bye.